everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reverse the Verse Live, the only show that tells you everything you need to know about taking care of your cheese. Joining us on the show this week, we are jumping right into it. We have our esteemed guests from here in the Los Angeles studio to follow up on your wonderful CitizenCon panels and presentations. We have Director of Technical Content, Mr. Sean Tracy.
Hi.
How you doing?
Great.
Just make sure your mic is working now. We
Yes,
had some mic troubles.
we had some mic troubles.
Right.
That was the delay, but I figured the timer was wrong.
And then we have the Character Art Director, Mr. Josh Herman.
Hello, everybody.
So, RTV, if this is your first RTV, maybe you're, first of all, I want to thank you for watching us and not the BlizzCon presentation that's going on right now, as I see half the people here are watching. RTV is where we take questions from you, our Star Citizen backers, and pose them directly to our developers. We take questions from two places. You can either submit your questions live in the chat, either Twitch chat, where we're broadcasting now, or in Spectrum, which you can find on robertspaceindustries.com. You can preface your question with the word question in capital letters surrounded by brackets. That's going to help our community management team pick it out from all the other conversation. And of course, we put up a thread all week where we collected questions in advance and let people vote on which ones they wanted to see answered most. Now, before we get started, before we get into this, why don't we talk a little bit as we do about what you do for Star Citizen, because every show is somebody's first. They're not going to know who you are. Somebody doesn't know who you are or what you do. It'll help guide the questions that come in. So Sean, why don't you start us off? So who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
What it is that you do here.
What it is that you do.
You
tell me.
The number of times that we have to prove ourselves, it's so...
Don't even get me started on that.
It so hurts me, every time.
Every
I
2
gotta
months,
prove.
it's like, what does Disco really do?
Okay, yeah, what is it that you
Disco
really
even
do here? No, I'm just teasing. So Technical Director of Content, it's basically like a tech art, tech animation, and tools director. So all the processes and pipelines that we do to get assets from the DCC tools or digital content creation tools, I work on with my team, as well as doing tons of different little R&D projects, things like FOIP, things like DNA or gene splicing and those kind of things. We tend to be pretty heavily involved in. So.
Would you say that most of your work is in helping other people do their work? Giving them the tools,
sure, it's enabling them. Yeah, making sure, definitely enabling them and making sure that all the stuff that they're wanting to do is scalable, is not going to take 20 years to make this game. It's going to take some time because the content's huge, but it's trying to come up with tools and processes that either haven't been tried in a certain way before, or just make them able to do their jobs, basically.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
And Josh, what do you do for Star Citizen?
Character art director. So basically, I oversee the character art team, the character concept team, and then I co-own the character tech team with Sean.
Yeah.
So that's basically everything from initial ideas of concepts, so sometimes just blue sky ideas, sometimes that's working with the design and narrative teams, basically figuring out what the visuals for those characters look like as a concept stage, then bringing it into the character art stage where we create the models, and then bring it over to character tech where they get rigged, simmed, and ready to be put into the game.
And that's not just player characters, that's narrative characters in Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, mission givers. If it's an entity that's supposed to be living or breathing in our game, it has to go through you at some point.
Yes.
Right. And that includes animals like Laboyans and stuff like that.
Aliens, all kinds of anything.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in. We're already collecting some questions from the chat. From the thread that we collected throughout the week, the top question, most voted up question was, will characters bruise or visually bleed? Like, I don't know, a lot of people wanted to know, just how much we could damage our characters, I guess. But will characters bruise or visually bleed?
Out there.
And which other damage states can we expect visually? Well, we do have some fantastic deformation and damage states for our ships.
Will I be able to tie up my character and beat him?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
We get some variation of this question quite often. Anytime we do a character-based show, because we do such fantastic destructive work on our spaceships, and spaceships are obviously a huge part of Star Citizen. But this is a first-person universe. We are not our spaceships. We are the players that are flying our spaceships.
Yes.
So where are we going with that for our players, if anywhere?
Well, maybe I'll give it to Josh in terms of what he wants. Mm-hmm. That's generally how this has to go, is that, I could come up with a bunch of answers, a bunch of tech, and a bunch of things that we could do or whatever. But ultimately, it's what definitely on the art direction side and even design direction, what do they want to do with it? So, I mean, not to put them in the firing line, but maybe you can
I
define
think it
sort
kinda
of
goes back to a
things
sort of
you'd like.
conversation we've talked about before, which is like the whole death of a spaceman thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that relates to that in a way because it's basically talking about the degradation of a character or character assets, so aging, dying, all that kind of stuff. When you go through that process as a character, you obviously want to communicate to the player that something is happening.
Right.
So whether you're getting older, you're getting beaten up, you're taking damage, or whatever that is, there's some sort of a visual
Go ahead and keep talking. He's just working with your mic.
that's going to happen there. So yeah, it's
We do want to share that stuff. As far as the specifics of certain types of cuts, certain types of gunshots, or whatever the scarring is, that's a high bar of what we want. It'll probably come in earlier as earlier versions, but we'll have to communicate it to the players in some way. So there will be, but as far as the fidelity of what that is, it's going to be.
I mean, to an extent, a lot of
Yeah.
games use like a UI health meters
Sure.
and stuff like that. But a lot of Star Citizen is about that diegetic approach. It's one thing to have a UI that just tell you the condition of something, but if there's a way to visually show it in our
Yeah.
universe, there's a way. So if you take off your helmet and therefore you don't have your UI, there's some other way for you to see
communicate it, yeah.
the damage and stuff. And we see a lot of that. A lot of games attempt that. To varying scopes, but I think Star Citizen is very much about putting as much of that information diegetically in the universe as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it actually makes it rewarding. That's the thing. So I was joking about everybody being sadists and stuff like this, but normally what you want to do, you want to be able to shoot at a character and you want to see some sort of reaction, and then additionally, I've always liked the idea, and this is something we've talked about, and it kind of gets covered in Death of a Spaceman to a degree, but I've always really liked the idea of some level of life-changing event for your character, meaning something absolutely egregious has happened, minus death, right? Like, not just dying, but you were standing on a grenade, or you got hit by a landmine, or something
Yeah.
like this, and having some kind of life-changing event that actually marks your character in some sort of way, whether that's you took a shot in the head, there's something like this, you didn't die, but on your next respawn, you've got a heck of a scar or something like this.
Or
I think that'd be
with
super
limbs like
interesting.
amputations or mechanical limbs and stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think that'd be super interesting. Technically, the challenges to doing these kind of things, like showing up decals on the characters and those kind of things, have their own little technical challenge. It's a little bit different than dealing with the ships. But doing dirt, doing decals, and that kind of stuff on the characters, yes, we can do. The real thing that you want, though, and what Josh alluded to, is the degradation, the wear, the tear, and the actual damage directly on the armor itself. So, I don't know, I'm sure they've noticed that we have a really pretty robust damage system on the ships. Now, the trick is we can't just copy paste that to the characters, and that would be incredible. But the problem is that fundamentally we're dealing with two very different mesh types. And actually what comes into play is the physics of that impact, because you should understand that on a character, when you shoot a character, you're not actually hitting the render mesh at all. We have a skeleton that has a bunch of bounds on it, and you might have seen it in various ATVs with the various debug sort of views. But there's a whole set of boxes basically that represent every one of the joints, every one of the bones that are in there, and you impact those. Problem is the render mesh itself knows nothing about that, right? Now, on the ships, it's actually part and parcel with the object that you're seeing. It's the same thing. So physics and the render mesh are connected with the ships, but on the characters, it's two very different things. So to come up with a system that works very, very similarly will take some doing, definitely. I know that Chris is really keen to get holes and wear and those actual impacts showing up on the armor, but you've got to think of some problems that come with that. So all of a sudden, what we've talked about with zone culling, that becomes a problem, because if you make a hole in the top one and you've culled out the zone on the bottom,
It's invisible.
all of a sudden you've got literally a hole through the character, right? Which maybe sounds kind of cool, but actually would look pretty weird,
Yeah.
right? So that's a problem. I could start listing out all kinds of different little issues within that. The zone culling is one of them. And then additionally is do you show it on the body, and would the body like disintegrate like the ship would? Probably not, right? We're going to have blood or something like that on the body. So there's a lot of different problems that come out of that. And what we do about it, can't tell you for 100%, but at the very least, The thing that we've got to get working is that the impacts on different areas of your armor will react differently.
Yep.
Right now, it's actually pretty unsophisticated, to be totally direct with you guys. Like, we don't change the material on the skeleton. The skeleton, the human, is actually, and you might have noticed this, that I've just set it up very simply, that if you hit center mass right now, you're going to get like a metal impact sort of effect, right? And that's because I've set the torso bones and the physics of the torso, and all the way down to the hips, I believe, to be metal, so that it reacts like metal. But now if you hit the head, if you hit the arms, or you hit the legs, you're going to get a blood. You're going to get this flesh sort of appeal. So first things first, we've got to get the skeleton changing physically to what's actually attached to you. So to talk a little bit about the cloth talk that we did, some of the stuff that we're looking at for the cloth and collisions with the cloth, that's going to cover all of that. So, I mean, there's a lot of steps there anyways. But first things first, we'll get the impact with the skeleton looking different.
Yeah.
I understand Jared doesn't understand, but that's fine. Jared doesn't need to understand.
Take offense.
I'm
at
just
Probably the only person on this half of the office that does understand.
That's true. I know.
right.
So great. We'll have good impacts on the characters, and then from there we'll want some sort of visual.
All right. Going from that to making the armors and the clothing even more complicated, the next question is, will there be clothing items or accessories that we'll be able to wear over flight suits and armors? We get this a lot.
Right.
Dusters, cloaks, scarves, capes. For me personally, I'd like to see capes.
Big cape fan.
Just,
Why not? Yeah.
I like capes.
Probably not, to give you the short.
Over armor.
Over armor. We can create items that allow that look. It just gets incredibly complicated to take an asset and put it over all the other stuff, right? A lot of the cloth tech you're talking about, yes, we could do it. It would be very complicated. The sim would be very intense. It would be a very intense look, and I don't think it would actually look like what people think it would look like.
yeah.
It would.
Everybody thinks it looks like the desert nomad. you know,
Yes.
with the cool, but that's a very
crafted, custom
you know,
look. So we can create all kinds of stuff that's like the nomad, that's like the legacy light outlaw, that have that kind of look. Yeah, we can make that, and that's not a problem. But as far as creating, saying, hey, I want to put this jacket on, then when I want to put my armor on, and then I want to put my duster back on, that creates a million different types of permutations of, oh, I had different arms on this time, I had a different chest piece on this time, I have a different helmet on this time, I have different legs on, because all that's going to be interacting with that duster, for example. So to be able to do all those combinations is just a lot of just setup work and asset work. And we can really get that same look much easier by just saying, you want a duster? Cool, here's a duster that is maybe, right now we have core, arms, legs, head, right? What if we give you a core that also includes the arms and it is a duster? So we can get you the exact same look, and it's going to have the more curated, crafted look like you're talking about, but it's going to alleviate all our asset concerns, all our extra concerns, and at the end it'll look better.
Gotcha. So no to being able to dress however you want, and then with whatever armor you want, and then adding a cloak on top of that, or adding a duster on top of that. But there may be specific armor sets or types that come with cloaks or armors baked in.
Yeah,
as
and
part of
it's
it.
not impossible for us to add components to an armor. So let's say it's a normal stain, like something that's more straight up would be like any of the Odyssey stuff, or we call it I think it's the Pioneer, which would be the Explorer armor.
Right.
That's kind of just a standard, spacefaring armor. We could do a component that has a cape. We'll just make a cape, and it can be something you can put on that, and then it'll be an attachment that goes on that. Like that kind of stuff we can easily do, and that's more of a something as we progress further into the character customization, which is not just the initial layer, but also the components inside of those layers, more accessories.
The first two questions that came from the live chat are actually kind of similar, so I'm going to link them together. They're both about coloring. What can you tell us about the ability to color our hairs in unnatural styles, like dye your hair pink, dye your hair green, whatever? And the second question was about armor recoloring, being able to dye your armors. It's like that. What are we thinking as far as player coloring of your character?
Yeah, so actually, right after this, or right after we do this, we have a meeting actually to discuss exactly that. I can tell you how it's done right now, and actually, I think the community found it interesting actually because to a degree, we dye our armors right now when we are creating NPCs. How we've set it up is that we've talked about the loadouts, we've talked about hierarchies of items and these kind of things. On every single armor right now, we have a thing, we call it the material variant item or something like this. And it's literally an item that gets attached, and all it does is it talks to its parent item and it says, use this material variant, use this color, basically. So to a degree, what you're doing is attaching a dye item. That's exactly what you're doing. So for us to expose that to the players is a real question mark. We don't know exactly if that's going to be the case, that we expose it as dyes, or is it, and the meeting is with Tony, this is an overall kind of, has to do a little bit with economy, has to do a lot with items, or are we actually just going to have separate sets of armor? This is the red one, this is the blue one, this is the purple one, or do we have one set of armor and then just 10 or 20 different dye colors that you could attach within it? So conceptually, we can go both directions right now. It's just going to be a design decision that should be made.
It also affects a lot of the asset side. So for example, right now it is basically you're purchasing stuff off the rack. So whatever vendor, you just like in the real world, you go to your store and you buy whatever's on the rack, and if they don't make a blue version of that, you don't get a blue version of that, and that's just kind of how it works right now, right? Now maybe when you go into somewhere, like you're purchasing a car, certain cars have a wide selection of colors and some have a narrow selection of colors, and again, that's going to be on manufacturer. But then some car manufacturers have a massive range of colors that you are essentially kind of choosing your own color. It's definitely possible for us to provide more or less in different scenarios. When it comes to the player creating their own custom one, it gets a little more complicated, not just on the asset side, but also on the interface side. From the actual material standpoint, there's so many parameters that are being changed from the materials it is itself. So is this a cloth? Is this a nylon? Is this a leather? Is this a polyester? Is this some fancy space fabric?
30 different metals.
Yeah, all the different types of metals. So are they choosing those? If they are they also changing the color on that? And that's going to go through all the different materials on single things. And if we do allow that, how do you communicate that to the player? And then also, how do we set it up on the asset side so that we don't have to go through a custom setup every time to say that on this shirt, for your shirt, for example, if I want to change the green to a blue or green to a purple or anything other color, that just on that shirt we're changing the color. Or you see it in all different types of games. Some games have a dye system, which is really rudimentary, where you say, okay, I'm going to change my shoulder pads, but just this big panel is going to be white, and then it'll be red or blue or whatever.
And your logos stay the same.
Everything else stays the same. All the trim stays the same. Everything else except for the big panels change. One of the advantages of providing what we would call a palette is that we can customize it the whole time. So rather than saying, yeah, you get to customize it, but because it's so much work to set it up on the asset side to customize the entire thing, you only get that panel. Rather than doing that, if you do a palette, we can say we can give you 20 variants, 100 variants, but every variant is different. It's not just the single panel. All the colors are different. So there's really big advantages into both ways from an art direction standpoint, curating custom looks, making sure that manufacturers have defined looks, that they might only sell bold colors of certain types of stuff. So it really ranges, and that's what that means.
There's a lot of considerations in this. It's not. You always hear the phrase from Jurassic Park. Just because you can do a thing,
Sure.
You were more concerned with whether you could do a thing, not whether you should do a thing. Or what I prefer, Star Trek VI. Just because we can do a thing doesn't mean we must do a thing. I think for the president of the United Federation of Planets, nobody quotes that guy. Does the same thing, but not just how we want to go about it in game, but there's also economy considerations.
Totally.
It's a lot of these big MMOs sell cosmetic things as post-launch monetization and stuff. So that all has to be factored in. Whether what aspects of that we want to keep for that, and what aspects we want to just expose for free and stuff like that. It's a much larger conversation that actually touches many aspects. I mean,
Definitely.
even when you're done with your thing with Tony, it'll probably have to go to a number of other people,
Sure.
and everybody's going to have their say and stuff. So we've been talking about customization of colors for spaceships, customization of colors for player armors and hairs and stuff like that for a while. It's I think I was going to say the word luckily, but not luckily. But we are still early in the development of those kind of things. And we're getting a player customization out of the DNA system stuff. So we don't necessarily need an answer for that right now. There's other more pressing stuff, but it's not a thing that's going to go away. You'll be hearing
most
some
certainly
variation of this conversation in future RTVs as we go forward. And we'll keep asking the question. We'll see if we get closer to the answer.
Yeah, and to kind of to answer very similar, like on the character damage stuff, the real next steps of this is, yes, we do the customization of colors on our NPCs, and most important to us is that you, the players, can now use those colors. So that's what that meeting's about mostly. So that'll be first step.
Yeah.
Once you can actually have access to the colors, but then beyond that, whether they're tinting them themselves or whatever, it's kind of like, it's not the most pressing.
Yeah, we've seen that in a while
issue.
with the pirate versions of ships. Like we see the Pirate Avenger, the Pirate Gladius, and people are like, hey, when can I get that
Yeah,
version
exactly.
of that ship? and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that. So yeah. So all right. Next question from the thread. It was actually the same question. All right, moving on. Will character customization be robust enough that we can create recognizable individuals who can be identified simply by looking at them?
Sure. I mean,
I would hope so.
but like, I guess I don't understand the question. Do they mean?
In World of Warcraft, for instance, you can't identify a person.
Yeah.
If you strip your orc and his orc and his orc and his orc of their armor, you'd be hard pressed to tell who was who without the name floating out there, because there's only 8 variations of orc.
No,
They're
that
saying,
won't
will
be
the
the case
character
for us.
customization be unique enough that you could see somebody without a name already and go,
We've
you,
got
Josh?
Yeah, we've got a couple
like
more.
Josh.
Yeah, we've got a couple more polys to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a lot more. You know, to use the buzzword fidelity on our characters than some of those other titles that you mentioned, which means that sure, of course you're going to be able to recognize them. I mean, we've got these AAA actors within Squadron 42, and they're pretty recognizable. So if you can imagine that you'll be able to push your character to quite that level, you're definitely going to be able to recognize the difference between your buddies. Like that's kind of, it's one of the biggest.
Yeah.
That's a pretty important
Exactly.
part of it, right?
When DNA comes out and you're no longer choosing one of 9 heads, right? I think that's going to be where you really start to see that
And
more.
Evo touched on it within his talk, which hopefully goes out pretty soon here, is that some of the things that you use to recognize certain people, we had to kind of taken away from the players a little bit in just this early customizer, so that we could fit all the hairs, all the helmets, and everything like that. By unifying the scalp and the neck, there's a profile difference, but the reason why, like you say, with another game, you would strip them of all their armor and everything, and they look pretty much the same, is exactly that problem, because they've unified to some description so that they can fit all the different assets and these kind of things on it. So being able to have different scalp shapes, different neck shapes, different face, dramatic differences will make it easy to identify from a distance. And I think Evo's talk almost spends 10 minutes kind of discussing that. So I think that will be a pretty important and valuable thing.
Yeah.
All right, from the live chat here, it says, how far do you plan to go with customizable body types? Fat, skinny, tall, short? What's our current thinking or intention, if not exact thinking? But what are we thinking about the player shapes? Because in Calling All Devs this week, we had Steve Bender talk about how they want to add IK into the ship cockpits to allow for being able to push buttons on different cockpits and stuff like that. And the community very obviously latched onto that as, that could give us different sized characters too, because now the points coming from different things now.
No,
No.
that's an assumption. That's a very dangerous assumption to make.
That's why I'm
and trust me, that it's not just the community that makes that assumption. It's developers too.
Yeah.
IK is not a magic wand.
No, I think you're wrong about that. IK is a magic word.
Right. It's a magic 3 wands. It's limbs. No, it doesn't solve that really so much. It makes it a little easier to deal with, but generally you still have the problem of metrics, right? That's the real problem. Is how how big do you go? How small do you go? And actually, the two are separate. One is the body shape, let's call it, and the second is the height. So one requires the skeleton to scale, one doesn't. That's one of the big points. So, yeah, and you'll notice it. I think it's actually, and from so far playing games like Red Dead Redemption or anything, kind of take a look around. Mostly everybody's about the same height. It's hard to notice when people got hats or helmets or whatever, those different things on. But the thing, you don't notice so dramatically the difference in height as you do, and again, Abel's talks, I think, a little bit about this, but maybe not on the body. You'll notice the body shape differences before you'll notice the height differences. And again, we've already got the two different sort of heights of skeleton. We've got our female, we've got the male. There's a difference in height between the two of them. But the body shape stuff is going to be more valuable, I think, right out of the gate, and causes way less problems than scaling the skeleton. The minute we scale the skeleton, animations need to be retargeted at runtime. That's a problem. Usually, you can't just uniformly scale a skeleton. In most of the MMOs that are online right now, it's a uniform scaling kind of thing, where your height is like everything changes at once, right?
Exactly.
And usually what people do, they make them super tall, and then they'll kind of pull the body shape in, so it's a thin, tall kind of guy or whatever. We rely so much on metrics, and being a first-person universe and having this really, intimate interactions with buttons and cockpits and flight controls and whatever else, that metric needs to be really rigid. So that's kind of the thing. So where I'm going with that is that, yeah, body shapes, we're going to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
But height differences, you kind of want to avoid that. And we'll have to bring some tech online to be able to do it without having to target a whole bunch of different animations.
I think what
to
you'll
make it
see,
possible.
obviously this is down the road, but like other games, when they start introducing characters of other size, they're of other genders or they're of other species.
Right.
So that's where you'll see your height variation.
Yeah.
We have so much, with 150 spaceships, all with interiors and stuff, tight corners.
Right, sure.
It's like the metrics, it's one of those things where I think in a vacuum, it doesn't seem like, oh yeah, just make the character taller, shorter. We've seen other games do it, whatever. But we have Star Citizen has so many moving parts, so many interactive parts that you can't just look at a feature in a vacuum on its own. You have to look at how it's going to interact with a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen other features. And when you get to that point, you go, oh, the height actually has many knock-on effects.
Sure. Look at the stuff that kicks up right now from the PTU. People are, the head position in the ships, right? It's always, oh, my head's too low. Oh, my head's too low. Oh, my head's too low. So now start scaling that skeleton. So now it's, depending if you scaled your skeleton up, you've got it way too high. Or if you made them super small, you've made them way too low. The other thing that it doesn't do well with a first-person kind of game is min-maxing. That's the other thing. So if I ever go play Star Marine, I'm going to be a female character at the very smallest I could possibly be to reduce my hitboxes and everything. Then I'm just a smaller target to hit. I can carry everything the same. I can do everything the same. But now all of a sudden I've got an advantage because I've min-maxed out. That doesn't lend itself well to a really cool looking universe. That lends itself to a lot of midgets running around,
Nobody in Star Citizen's going to min-max anything. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, they will. They'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. But you know what I'm saying? Like if you go into PvP, I think Guild Wars is a good example right now. Everybody's tiny. And it's just harder to click on them or whatever else. Yeah, I think it's a dangerous road to start going down, and it will have tendrils that just connect into everything. And mantling will be a big problem too.
All right. It totally.
Sure, mantling. Well, okay,
Mantling and cover.
we're gonna keep. Well, I'll keep talking about it a little bit because I've got all kinds of problems with it. Because Steve went, yeah, we need skeleton scaling, whatever. I'm like, yeah, super awesome. That'd be great. So what are we gonna do about cover? So think of cover. Cover is hard enough with the female being a different height. So you get behind something and just think a box, and you've got to go up and over and look down. So you actually have, there's a real problem, and we fixed it for the female, but if you think you're at a wall or a railing or something like that you're ducked behind with cover, and you've got to shoot down, right? Your angle, your trajectory, or your angle of attack is going to be so different depending on your height, right? So if you want a really good one, you'd be a super tall guy, right? Because then when you pop up over that box, you can shoot almost straight down from from up high. But again, if you're tiny, you're only going to have a really shallow kind of angle across that, and our metrics are important. Also, if you're too tall and we put you behind cover and your head's sticking out, well, it's not very good cover, is it?
Now, I think a lot of people would say those are trade-offs for things. You just listed an advantage tall people would have and an advantage that short people would have.
But we
So-
can't balance around that because we have no control.
I think you'd also see the pros and cons as heavily weighted to the cons. There are pros.
Yeah,
like
sure,
you
definitely.
pointed
Yeah, we're not
out.
going to sit here and spend the next 30 minutes listing out all,
Yeah,
a full list of stuff.
That's usually
But-
my job, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just say, because this is a conversation that's happened many times
Yeah.
over the last couple of years, and because of the fidelity bar that we strive to, and because of how realistic we want the world to be, and everything is close to as it should be, as we can have it and still maintain a game and game balance.
definitely.
If there was an easy path to doing this that didn't mess up 10 other things, we would
Yeah, of
probably
course.
be pursuing it.
Yeah, sure. But we always make that balance. Is it worth the amount of work? Is it worth the effort that that's going to take? And sometimes we lose that battle because sometimes the stuff we'll do is a lot of work, and sometimes it seems like a really small win, and hopefully those get big later. But like those are real hard decisions that have to be made, which is it worth it?
Right. Because we just gave a big no to height and stuff. I want to give something to
That's
the
not a
backers.
solid no. All my no's are no right now. But if I come up with some sort of idea, or my team comes up
Fair
with
enough.
an idea, or Evo
Yeah.
makes some magic happen, or Steve has a crazy idea,
Yeah.
then I reserve the right to say yes.
You make a good point. One of the best things about Evo's presentation was the whole how we didn't think there was an answer
Yeah.
to this, so we shelved it.
Yep.
We shelved it. We said no. You were not going to be able to have different head shapes.
Yep.
And then we discovered the answer later on. It's
Yeah.
game development.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Yep.
Yeah. So
Sure.
So okay. So Titan suit.
Oh.
Ooh, awesome.
What can you tell us about the Titan suit? I'm just going to keep it there. This
Yeah.
question's a little more detailed,
You
but
just
I'm
want a broad one?
not going to lead it.
Yeah.
I'm going to. You are the primary instigator over the years of mentioning the Titan
know.
suit. The only reason I have to deal with Titan
my-
suit questions
my
for the last
favorite thing.
3 years, 4 years is because of you.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask as a blanket thing, what, if anything, can you tell us about the Titan suit at this point?
Okay, I don't think we can actually talk about what we're doing with it right now because there's an
I'd say it's in development.
I gotta
It's still
say-
in development. It is.
We're confirming that the Titan suit is in development.
Yes, it is one of those. We talked about it briefly before a couple times, I
Yes.
think, or it has been mentioned before.
Yeah.
We said last time that the turn radius was messed a couple times. Remember that?
Right, that was with the
Yeah.
the arm. The
So we
design.
went back to the drawing board and kind of reworked it. It's still kind of being finalized on how that will work. We have a much stronger idea of that, but it hasn't progressed too much past the concept stage anymore because we started to put our other non-concept resources on things that you've seen recently, like hair, like shading, like skin. So a lot of the improvements you saw at CitCon,
Yeah.
CitizenCon.
Yeah, I'm personally really keen to get to the Titan because I think,
Yeah, same.
as I've talked about before, I feel like it's a layer of gameplay that's actually missing within our game right now. Like, very directly that right now an infantryman has very little chance against a ship. Ship never is second guessing, whether he wants to land on that pad or not. That I think you need something basically between that infantryman and a ship. And you need something that is either able to hold ground in the open, like it's a design requirement that it can basically hold the landing pad. Whether or not it's gonna win against a Constellation, probably not. But the whole point is to make them second guess. They can't just sit there and camp the pad basically.
Right.
And really it's coming down to the some different design requirements. So for me, it needs to be able to do that. So it needs to be able to make ships second guess. But then additionally, it needs to also be quote unquote a kind of shock troop on the interiors, right? But there's got to be give or take of that, right? It can't move that quickly in the interiors. You need to be able to outmaneuver it. It's got to have weak spots in it. It's got to have weak spots on the back or the sides.
places it
somewhere.
can't go.
Or
Right.
places it can't go. But yeah, generally I feel like
It's going to
that layer-
violate those metrics.
Yeah, of course. And I feel like that layer is generally just not there. So I'm really keen to get to it. But it's really important that the actual concept and design of the thing, because it's actually going to do a lot more than just combat. Like that's what we really want out of this.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much we should talk about the frame kind of thing. Or,
Yeah, you're at the point.
no. So we'll leave it at that with that. But yeah, we really want to get to this.
And just in case we buried the lead there, assuming everybody knows what we're talking about, the Titan suit is a mech.
No, what?
Not a mech.
Stop that.
It's not a mech.
I'm going to explain this for everybody.
I know.
A mech,
had to do it.
has a cockpit. A mech has a cockpit. You sit in it. There's a seat. You don't put your legs. You're sitting down in something. Has a cockpit. A battle suit is like Iron Man.
Sure.
Is like is like an exoskeleton. It's basically a suit that you put on. Hence, battle suit versus Gundam
I just
mech
wanted to
warrior.
trigger you. I just
mech.
wanted to trigger you.
It worked.
I just wanted to trigger you. Sean's had some history with this. Actually, you have some history with this too, actually.
Yeah.
All right. So and just before anybody gets crazy, that is way out.
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
that's not anything that's coming
Right.
anytime soon. That's your hint for something way out. Okay. We get this a lot. We've mentioned the female character a couple times. Will there be special clothes only for female and male characters?
Yes, there will.
Okay.
There will be. For the most of the time, there will be one-to-one parity on assets
Yep.
on what they can have, but there will be custom ones per gender.
Okay. Let's see what else we got. Beards. We always get a question about beards anytime we talk about characters. You know, this community has a fascination with beards, and I don't know why. But will we be able to modify our beards in game, like shave it off, grow it back, groom, and tie it? Basically, they want to switch styles.
Switching like styles, I think, yeah. As far as like cutting and grooming, I don't know if we'll go that in depth.
But
to be honest, It'll
yeah,
more be
but Chris has
selection.
been watching. Chris has been watching videos.
It's true.
Of RDR, right?
That's true. That's true. That may change, but currently it's
So, yeah.
it's,
You're gonna
it's
see a Star
selection.
Citizen hair tonic.
Yeah, no, it was a great email from him, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I figured out how they're doing it. They're doing this. I'm like, yeah, oh, cool, that's awesome. That's good for them. Yeah, I mean, there's sky's the limit for us on that kind of stuff. It's what Chris will want out of it in the end, but you got to think of time. Again, is it worth it, right? In your space combat, FPS game, is it worth it that the beard is growing at 0.5 millimeter every hour? Right? I don't know, right? Like, and it might be for the community indeed, but yeah, for sure we're gonna have different styles. and
Definitely
these kind of things.
styles.
But whether you have to go, get yourself shaved and stuff like this, I don't know. I couldn't answer, but we could. It's just, again, is it worth it? I don't know. And sometimes that's not up to me to decide. It's up to the likes of Josh or Chris or something like this.
Gotcha.
To go back real quick, just because I can see the Twitch chat going crazy about mankinis, I want to explain this female-male thing a little bit, right? Yeah, they are. There's pictures, I'm sure. There's links. There's Google searches. There's, I don't know. So let me explain the male-female thing, because no, that doesn't really mean that there'll be a mankini at all. What we're going to have is one-to-one items between the male and female, and that's actually a critical component for that female to ship.
Yeah.
Imagine if we shipped a game that didn't have all the stuff that a male could do for the female. I don't think that would be okay. So we're not going to do that. It needs to be one-to-one, and that means all the armor that exists for a male will exist for a female. If you own the CDS medium armor for your male, it's actually the same item. We've unified the item so that if you load this male item, or sorry, it's not a male item. If you load this item, depending on what skeleton you're on, it's just gonna look different.
Right.
So technically you own it, right? You own it for a male, you own it for a female. There's not two separate purchases that you have to make. Now about the unique items. When you get a unique item, there was two ideas that we kind of floated. And initially it was like, okay, let's think of like a really nice cocktail dress for a female. What if a male owned that cocktail dress? What do we do? Now, we're not going to spend a lot of effort in making mankinis or man versions of dresses or whatever. But the first idea that we came up with was just have a male equivalent of that. So if it's a nice cocktail dress, it would be a nice cocktail suit
Do you know what I mean? Something like this. So that's one idea, and that might be the case. But it might actually be the case that there is just a totally unique item.
That there is no
for the male.
equivalent for.
That there is no equivalent for it. At the very least, we'll make sure that, of course, there's not, more of those female items than there are male ones. They should have their own special items. But just because we say that that we'll have these unique female and male items doesn't mean those ones are shareable. But on the basic, if you own a blue shirt, you own a male blue shirt and a female blue shirt. But if you own, I guess, a cocktail dress, that'll just be the cocktail dress, and the male can't put that on.
I know. All right, and it's important to say that when the female model does get introduced in Star Citizen, we're talking about these items. If we end up making these items, they're not there in the first initial drop or whatever. We're talking about that 1-1 parity.
Yeah.
When the model does get introduced.
Yes.
Yeah, that has to be there. Like,
Yeah, one parity first.
Both, but yeah, Josh and I have made that very clear to production and to everybody that is critical. That is a 1-to-1, and on the combat side, anything that has
it's on a
gameplay
lot of things.
implications.
Yeah, it's not just on the asset side; it's on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting questions. It's a simple question, but I think it leads us to a couple other areas. The question was simply, any chance we can get pointed ears on our character? And obviously this person's a big fan of Star Trek, I guess. But it leads me to thinking about humans that grow up on alien planets and stuff like that. You see that in The Expanse right now, between the Belters and stuff. How far can typical human physiology that we know today change, not just in 1,000 years, but maybe in 20 generations of that family growing up on a different planet with different environmental factors, with different atmospheres and stuff. Have we talked about anything like that?
We have,
What
had
are our
very
thoughts?
in-depth, long conversations about that, and it's definitely something we want to get to. For me, from just the general sci-fi experience, introducing other alien species is obviously a big deal to break away from the mold of just being a pure human game. But even altered humans or something that's they are still human as a species, but they've changed, is something that I think we need to break up the landscape of what you see.
Absolutely.
So whether it's skin colors that are not in the normal ethnicity range of what we see now, maybe they are on, to use John Carter, a red planet, and their skin turns red, and over time from the atmosphere, or from, I think it's if you drink or inhale lots of copper, like your skin can turn blue.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a person who grew up on Hurston their entire life, and whose parents grew up on Hurston their entire life, and whose grandparents grew up on Hurston.
Generations.
How does that change their
Hundreds of
physiology?
years.
Is their skin texture different than what we would think of a human?
That would be the plan. And as far as like the pointed ears, like the more specific physiological things, all that would really take is either us finding an actor with pointed ears and putting that into the DNA pool.
That's right.
Or it takes us just changing and sculpting that actor or some actors to add that to the DNA pool.
We scanned Jared's head. Oh. How do you look with pointed ears? You could just reference Jared in his fourth head, include his ears. We'll point him a little bit.
We'll choose that one.
We'll give you some
Perfect too.
fangs.
Yes, they had to use their big scanners to get my head in there.
Actually,
It's totally possible.
And I want to talk a little bit more about this because I think we have some cool ideas here that I talked about a little bit on an interview a little while ago, but I want to talk about it here. And this is something that I'm keen to work on with Josh as well as with David Haddock. So we've been looking into this, and actually just literally this week I have a huge document from Andreas Rohr, who also did one of the talks there with Evo on the gene splicing stuff, which has been a real close thing to my heart anyway. So how that whole system works, as Evo described, that we have this Protoss mesh and we have a bunch of different heads that are within it. So we have a little gene pool. What I'd really like to do with this is phenotype a gene pool per starting location. So if you can think of this in relation to this wide gene pool, we've got a bit of a problem because, we've got like hundreds of heads within this gene pool.
Right.
And to expose those hundreds of heads to you in a creator is not very intuitive. There's a lot to go through. There's, and there's some redundancies here and there. But what I'd like to restrict it down is just to a subset of people from Hurston, and then we do all the visuals that Josh is talking about. So let's say your starting location is Hurston, or your starting location is ArcCorp. I'd like that gene pool to be kind of phenotyped for that particular area.
Now, I'm not talking as on the nose as most, I would say a lot of other games go, to reference, Elder Scrolls, for example. And not saying this is a bad way to go. It's a very overt and obvious way to go. If you're Redguard, you're African American. If you're Nord, you're a Northern European Caucasian.
Right.
That is super on the nose stuff, right? What I'd prefer is to put some subtlety into this, which is reality, how it actually works, because to be a phenotyped American or a phenotyped Italian or a phenotyped, even a Canadian for that matter, there's going to be subtleties within that. Now, generally, we all kind of look similar-ish, but you might have a gene pool that's a little heavily weighted to one side versus the other. So then on average, when you're blending those particular guys or those particular textures, I hope that the subtleties will show so that you will have an idea that, oh, all these NPCs, everybody is coming from this particular gene pool, so they all kind of look one way, and then all these other guys on ArcCorp and everything, and all those players that have started on ArcCorp, kind of look another way. So I don't know if this will be as obvious as I want it to be, but I think it mimics reality a little cooler, and it also makes character creation a little more interesting because you are sourcing from a different gene pool depending on where you start. And of course you are, because if you, like you said, if you grew up in Hurston and your father grew up in Hurston and you're gonna have a certain phenotype, a certain haplogroup, whatever we would call it. But I think that would be an interesting way to try it.
Absolutely.
But it won't be quite as overt, I would say, as some other games really treat it.
You want it to be when you see someone that's like, hey, are you from Hurston? You don't want to be like, that person's from Hurston.
Right.
You want there to be a
exactly.
question, a suspicion,
But this
an inclination.
general kind of like, oh, Hurston people kind of look like this. They've got a strong brow. They've got high cheekbones. Whatever it is, I'm just making up stuff. But like that would be really cool. And I know when we first bring this idea to David Haddock, he returned a document that had some insane level stuff.
great.
In
It was really good.
It's really cool, super creative. But here's the flip side is, as we've talked about gene splicing and DNA, the combination, we've talked about human ranges and how we keep it within a human range because you're always sourcing from a human. So we'd have to come up with sculpts or these kind of things to source from guys that had some weird things like the big ridges in the head or white eyes or whatever it is, right?
Sloth from the Goonies.
That too.
totally.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a neat approach. It's something that hasn't, to my knowledge, been done exactly like that before. And I'd love to see what the results could be. And it doesn't actually require a huge amount of extra work. What it really is, it's a data management problem. It's like we've just got to juggle our gene pools around. This is going to be very weird.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very weird, like playing God a little bit. It's like, oh yeah, who evolved all together? And this guy. It'll be fun.
We just had a question come in from the live chat. That's the antithesis of the gene pool and everything. We see a lot of games where you can scan your faces in using an app or a webcam. Has there been any discussion about using that to scan our face and it goes, and goes, all right, here's your DNA profile based on the image.
Using
of your
like the
face."
existing picture, the fidelity is just not there. It doesn't get there. I think you can see, everybody that's played the game can see, like when you zoom in on pretty much anything in our game, like it holds up.
Yes.
Your webcam stuff that we've seen before, even I think for those games that I've seen, never has really looked amazing. So that's.
I hate to always call it games, but NBA, what was it?
I know. That's what I was just thinking about exactly.
Right. One of the NBA games.
They tried, and it was a valiant
sometimes it
thing.
works
Yeah,
beautifully.
sometimes it works, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
My face doesn't have enough like lines to it, like cheekbones. I think it's kind of just round and flat. So when I do it, those things, it just looks like this weird. I look like Kirby.
If you want to
I
know
look
what
like
we're
Kirby when I
talking
put my
about,
face.
simply Google NBA face scan, go to images, and you'll know what we're talking
The
about.
views and opinions exposed by Sean Tracy do not represent those of Cloud and Grim Games, Robert
there's great
Space
stuff in
Industries,
there. Oh
or
my
its
God.
subsidiaries.
I don't think I'm getting in trouble with that. That can't be. I just direct them.
Okay, going from.
But the thing is I'm not sure we're actually answering the question because
we don't
is
do that here.
No, what is being asked for there is less because I think
They
I'm
wanna
pretty
see
much
themselves.
because I've actually had this conversation. I think even on an RTV before about like actual face textures and why I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And why I think Chris wants something like that. But the 2D image of your face is not enough. Now, to use something to structure the face, the one that you've got in there, and blend different heads to get
I
to
could maybe
achieve
give you like
that
a
shape.
template image on your screen. You can adjust your thing to kind
That's
of match
not
it.
beyond the realm of possibility. The problem is we can't just do it off one image. It's impossible. We have no idea of 3D space,
Yes.
right, with the one image. So at the minimum, we would need you to do a face-on shot and then a profile shot. And then we might be able to do something, but we would have to reconcile all the points between the two images, and then from the points, drive a whole bunch of blend shapes to get to that position and go from there.
Choosing from the existing pool.
And choose from the existing pool the right heads to get to the right place, to get to the right thing.
What if they have their own 60 camera scanning rig?
Then they're welcome to apply at robertspaceindustries.com.
Bring your
Slash careers or
Slash
jobs.
career.
We're actually almost out of time.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Still character related from the live chat.
Sure.
How do you approach doing robots or droids? Is that even a thing for Star Citizen?
I mean, there's nothing that stops us from doing that kind of stuff. It's more of a creative, high-level direction of, do they really exist in our game? Like, is there a reason for that? I think there's been a lot of lore that the lore team have done about why or why not androids exist or don't exist, or robots do not or do exist. So it's just kind of...
Yeah. Old-time backers will remember early Wingman's Hangar episodes where Chris was not very hot on the idea of robots running around and stuff like that.
And that's fine. I mean, from an asset standpoint, it's just kind of creating its own, whether we put it on an existing rig or not, is a big choice, and then it basically becomes its own species.
Cyborgs, though.
Cyborgs.
Cyborgs are a different thing altogether. We can do cyborgs.
Yeah,
We already
cyborgs.
started with Battagula.
Yeah, cyborgs are totally possible. There's already one out there.
There's one
Yep.
cyborg in the burst right
Hopefully that's a little nice sneak peek to like what we can do and what we want to do. And
That's why your head can rotate 360 degrees.
Well, yeah, no, it's always been hard. The minute we start talking about cyborgs and stuff and Death of a Spaceman, it's like the first thing I want to do when I go in game is just like, shoot me here.
Yeah,
like,
get rid of
Sean,
this thing.
shoot me here, just like a bunch of times.
yeah.
Upgrade me.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Shoot,
We're down
doing
for
what we can do. All right. Let's see. Hair. With a very detailed hair that we saw prototyped in at CitizenCon, is that going to replace all the hair in the game that we've got now? Is that going to be affected by things like wind? I'm combining a couple hair questions right now because we're
That's fine.
like how far do we see hair going? Basically, is it going to be affected by physics? Is it going to be runtime? Is it going to replace everybody's current hair cards? What are we thinking?
I missed a meeting yesterday, so maybe I'll let Josh answer.
it's what you guys saw in Squadron is like us trying to, in that trailer and the talks, is all about us trying to push it as far as we can.
Yeah.
Right now, I think we'll probably have to take some steps back to get it into Star Citizen just because of the performance. But the goal of all that R&D and pushing that as far as we can is to see what the best level we possibly can get into Star Citizen is. So I think it will definitely change. Like what the players see right now will for sure change because our entire pipeline's changing. So I would imagine that most of the styles that they see in the game now won't be there in a year or 2 years because it will be replaced with a new iteration that will look better. As far as it being affected by physics, yes, I think there'll be components of that will for sure be affected by physics.
Characters walking around with hair like this.
Yeah, like the Mohawk should be, blowing over. If they
Depending on
didn't-
how much product you
yeah.
have. I've seen some
Plastic.
I've seen some
some-
Hawks that would stand up to a hurricane.
Don't move.
That's
yeah,
fair.
yeah, they can.
So yeah, we
puncture
definitely
holes
want
and
to,
things.
we want to push it. Part of the reason that the players aren't seeing new hairstyles go into the game right now is because we are figuring out how we're going to do it in the future, and that's us not wanting to burn time into creating content that we're going to replace.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, as it happens in game development, sometimes you have to do that. You can't avoid it. But a big part of development is trying to work smarter, not harder.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
trying to figure out when you know what you're working on right now is temporary or intermediate or just a placeholder while we're waiting for other systems to come online. Folks often ask us, why is this system take so long, or why is this system not being prioritized right now? It's because there are other systems that need to come online first. and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Sure, and a lot of I see that too. It's like, why aren't you fixing this or this or this? I mean, certain people are specialized in certain things. So sure, we could give some object container streaming bugs to Josh, but I
You don't
mean,
want that.
well, yeah, exactly. Like, you know, I'm
yeah.
very sure he could fix it, but how long that will take? Maybe take a year,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
two,
possibly.
as he learns everything, and so it just doesn't make sense sometimes, right? The person that needs to work on it, or the team even, can't be doing anything. On the hair front, exactly as Josh said, we're pushing that visual bar big time. Right now, we've just got to rein in the performance slightly, and we'll probably be in pretty good shape. We've got to establish these relatively two kind of pipes, where we've got one for our really AAA high-end T0 heads, and then we got another one for gene splicing DNA, because both have kind of different requirements within it.
All right, well, that's it. You guys did it.
Yay.
I tell you, these things are easy, right?
Yeah,
These are easy.
yeah,
They
it
go by-
always
they go
goes a
by
lot faster.
Yeah,
than I
totally.
think.
No, next year we'll be doing 3-hour
Oh,
RTVs.
I got to give that
We
shout
will
out.
not be doing 3-hour RTVs. Yes, well,
For my
I noticed
t-shirt.
your shirt's
Yeah.
on a t-shirt.
Right.
It's a fancy
It's a
shirt.
jersey. It's a
polo.
It's a polo.
It's a polo.
Jersey polo.
You have a fancy polo
jersey.
one.
Yeah.
Yes, and this is come from Todd Leisman. Might be getting that wrong, but
Don't
I
ask
hope
me. I'm not
I get it right.
pronouncing names.
Representing Osmonauts. So it's a super cool shirt. I was actually pretty excited when we got it. We got it just before CitizenCon, and Stephen Cam had walked in and he was passing them out, and I thought they were the CitizenCon shirts, and I'm like, this is awesome! Oh my goodness! Usually we're just like one color, and it wasn't the CitizenCon shirts. They ended up being one color, which is fine. Our CitizenCon shirts were beautiful, but this is really cool. So.
Yeah. I don't have an Osmonaut shirt. Tyler got an Osmonaut shirt. He showed me his Osmonaut.
I have one. I forgot to wear it.
You have an
today.
Osmonaut
My wife
shirt.
thinks I'm a super nerd though, because it's got
Does have your name on it.
it's got my name on the back.
They're cool. I really like them.
Yeah. I had an Osmonaut shirt, but it said Will Lewis on the back.
I don't know if I can.
Yeah. it
Yeah.
says Sean on the back. What? Stand up and show it off, they say.
Yeah, but I can flex.
You're
this
good.
way.
Oh yeah, keep going.
My name is that way. There you go. Good enough.
The views of
Actually,
Sean
yeah,
Tracy.
no,
you know,
the ages. This is cool too. Oh, no, wrong side. That badass, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I thought that was cool. Anyways,
All right. Well,
still
that does-
extra large though. Sorry.
At least you didn't bring coffee creamers with you this week.
No, that's Steve's thing.
All right. Well, he's
back
coming
today.
back. He's coming back.
I know.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
All right. Well, that about does it for this week's show. Special thanks to Sean Tracy and Josh Herman for taking their time to be here with us. Tune in next week when we'll have something. Actually, don't know yet.
Wow.
I don't know yet. There's some things up in the air. Well, so I had a thing, and then they're like, oh, but I work from home on Friday. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
then how are you going to do the show if you work from home on Friday? I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that. So I had a thing, and now I don't have a thing, so I got to find a thing. So we'll have a thing. That's it. I'm Jared. That's Sean. That's Josh. That was JJ behind the scenes. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.